are local.
The international community is observing every
Why the main market is in chaos. People are...
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye.
Aye. We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. Now, we know that Africa is often described, as a continent rich in natural resources, young in population, and full of potential. Yet, despite many decades of independence, we still have we are still grappling with issues when it comes to poverty, poor infrastructure, and development issues generally. And now to talk more on the issues of development in Africa, we have with us in the studio this morning Professor Ozonia Ojielu. He is the UN Resident Coordinator and representative of the UN Secretary General in Rwanda. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning, Uchenna. Good morning, Lillian, and good morning to your viewers.
You're well. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. It's back to be back home in Enugu.
Exactly.
On a short holiday.
To have you here as well.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to know first and foremost, in your opinion, how do you see, development in Africa? How is it looking like to you now?
Well, good question. From the period of the 1990s, when we had the collapse of the Soviet Union, and therefore the erosion of the bipolar global architecture in which countries in Africa were either pro-West or pro-East, and that hobbled development because Africa became like the playground for many actors on issues that in some cases did not particularly concern the African countries. There's been a wave of democratization, a wave of transitioning from totalitarian governments, military governments to democracy. So in one sense, democracy is on the ascendancy in Africa, even if we have recessions and regressions in a number of countries. There's also been a lot of effort to address poverty in many countries. So you will see that the poverty indexes, or you use what we call the Human Development Index that the United Nations Development Program, one of the UN agencies, publishes. You will see there's significant change. Maternal mortality has reduced, infant mortality has reduced, health issues are on the upswing. So that's on the positive side. Now, on the negative side, there are a host of factors. You can characterize them as political, economic, social, environmental, that prevent Africa from reaching its full plenitude in terms of where we could be. Political, related to peace and security issues, conflicts, terrorism, democratic regressions across many parts of the continent. There can be no development without peace, and no peace without security. So big political developmental issues. On the economic issues, poverty, debt, many countries in Africa are debt-ridden. If you look at the percentage of debt to GDP, many countries in Africa are 65 to 70% debt to GDP ratio. You know what it means? It means that governments are spending all their revenues servicing international debt. So there can be no real development on the capital expenditure side. So on the economic issues, a lot of poverty, a lot of exclusion. Many countries are less than where they were 20 years ago. So that's not a good sign. Social issues, huge demographic explosion. Population of Africa, most countries in Africa, 70% are under 30 for the youth. They have aspirations. They have expectations for their own national transformation. So we're not addressing them well. Education. Many of our kids have significant problems in terms of literacy, in terms of writing skills, in terms of reading skills. We're not preparing the youth for the jobs of tomorrow. The jobs of tomorrow, need critical thinking. And many of our schools are just producing students who write exams that they've crammed, script they've crammed. On the health side, significant challenges on health as well. So take the entire social sector. I can write a PhD thesis for you on social issues. Environmental and climate issues. Look at the impact of climate change. Across Africa, flash floods, mudslides, rains, all of those impacting development, drought. The entire Sahel belt is a victim of climatic and environmental factors. The Lake Chad Basin that services more than 5 countries is drying up. For those who live in southern Nigeria, we used to know, I don't know whether you're probably too young to know about what was called Azumangala. Azumangala used to come from Lake Chad Basin. It has disappeared. Do you know the consequences of the drying up Lake Chad? The millions of people who fed from the Lake Chad as fisher folk, as farmers, as herders for their cattle, they're all moving southwards. So now you see millions of herders and their cattle moving southwards, not just from Lake Chad, but across the entire Sahel belt. It's leading to violence, leading to conflict, it's leading to armed confrontation with sedentary communities in the south. So a host of all those issues almost seem to wipe out the development gains we've made in Africa. That's the big challenge.
All right.
Okay, so we want to know what are the dwindling roles of the United Nations in Africa, but most especially, let's bring it down to our country, Nigeria.
Actually, I will contest the narrative that the role of the UN in Africa is dwindling, because the UN is not a monolith.
Okay.
The UN has several pillars. You have the peace and security pillar, you have the development pillar, you have the humanitarian pillar, you have the human rights pillar. Take the humanitarian pillar, for example. Lillian, look at the number of conflicts in many parts of Africa, whether it's Eastern DRC, whether it's Central African Republic, or in parts across the Sahel. The humanitarian needs are people who have suffered from displacement, who have suffered sexual violence, who have suffered all kinds of deprivations because of war and conflict. It's the UN, through its humanitarian response, that's taking care of them. Globally, we have more than 122 million people that are displaced globally, in many parts of the world. In Africa, it's the same. So Sudan, what is happening in Sudan, in South Sudan, all of those. So on the humanitarian pillar, the problem is that the donors who continue to fund humanitarian interventions are having what we call humanitarian fatigue. They keep bringing in, because our leaders, our politicians continue to fight among themselves, creating the displacement and the violence that you see. That's on the humanitarian pillar. On the development pillar, the UN is at the forefront in terms of the support to member states. First, in developing a national development strategy, in designing a national development strategy that makes our countries fit for the ages, that looks at the socio-economic transformation of Africa. African youth are in a hurry. Our governments have to be responding in ways that meet the aspirations of Africans. Our role is to support our governments to develop the national strategies to meet those and to support them in the implementation. The big issue is in the implementation. Africans write excellent policies, but are very poor at implementing policies. On the human rights pillar, the challenge is not the United Nations. The challenge is member states. We are at a critical inflection moment in the world right now, that because of terrorism, because of internal socio-economic contradictions in a society, some governments are no longer observing the international human rights instruments that they signed, that they committed to. So governments are beginning to abuse the rights of their citizens. So our job is to help them see that this is not sustainable, provide the capacity, provide the analysis and the training they need so that governments can comply with the rights protections of their citizens, because it's in their national constitutions on human rights issues. It's not a UN mandate. These are the national constitutions of government to comply with the rights that their citizens are entitled to. Where we have a problem, that's my final point, is on the peace and security pillar. We have not been able to stop all the wars that are raging in many parts of Africa. But it's not the job of the UN to stop the wars, because the UN doesn't have an army. It's the job of the member states. The member states constitute the UN Security Council. They constitute the UN General Assembly. If you don't have consensus among member states that then says to the UN, set up a peacekeeping force, deploy peacekeepers, separate the parties from fighting, and help train the militants to become active citizens, nothing the UN can change. We can come back to Nigeria later, but I think that this foundation is important so that our viewers understand where we are as a global community, but also as a continent, that there is significant regression in terms of development in the continent, and that should worry every African.
Exactly. Now, we are going to bring it down to Nigeria now. From all the things you've said, you spoke about, drafting laws, but having a problem with implementation, amongst other things, which seem to stem from leadership issue. So now I'd like to know, leadership is a big challenge in Africa and even in Nigeria. So how do we get away from this leadership challenge?
One way is to look at what is happening around the world and take inspiration from it. Because right now around the world, leaderships are in contestation. People are challenging the notion of leadership. People are challenging the notion of democracy. People think that democracy doesn't work. And you know what is interesting, Lee and Uche?
No.
The countries we looked up to as our templates for democracy are themselves in crisis. The whole logic of hate of others, of migrants, you don't want people to come in. The whole internal tribes in quotes, yeah? The tribal nature of politics in parts of Europe and North America, we never thought that these countries we saw as our global templates could go through such experiences. But you know what he says to us? What he says to us as Nigerians and as Africans, put aside the labels. Reflect internally. What is it that works for you as a society? We inherited systems of governance from our ex-colonial masters. So my take, I want to be positive about what can come out of the current challenges we see in Nigeria, but also in the rest of Africa. It's time for a real national dialogic about what governance means for Nigeria and for Africans. Because governing, the whole spirit of to govern is to reconcile. To govern is to bring together. To govern is to seek consensus. So if that is the whole essence of governing, it means that you approach governance and leadership with a sense of reconciliation, with a sense of intermediation, of consensus seeking, of finding the middle ground. If that is your political culture, you can solve every problem. But if your political culture is outbidding, it's contestation, it's adversarial, it's winner take all, then you see everybody as an enemy. So then you have a very tribal political culture. So for me, that is the starting point to redefine what this means. So whether it's in the National Assembly or in various platforms at community level, at national level, or whether we need a new national dialogue that doesn't talk about tenure of office for leaders, because people get scared when you talk about tenure of office. They think somebody wants to extend themselves. Take that out of the equation. Begin from reconceptualizing what does governing mean for Nigeria. And on that basis, you create an ethos of a political culture. So we don't have a political culture. So the labels that people carry about are meaningless. That's why you see politicians today, they're in one party, tomorrow they're in another party. So the question then becomes that we then vote on the basis of the person. Do we like the person? Do we trust the person, or we vote on the basis of ethnicity? Is one of us. But imagine a scenario where our parties are based on ideas. I don't want to use the word ideology. When you say ideology, people think socialism, capitalism. No, it's ideas. On what body of ideas, conceptually, can you articulate the logic chain between the ideas you espouse and the direction of travel, if you're in power, and the kinds of results you want to attain? Then we can reconceptualize what happened. So where we are in Nigeria now is Nigeria is in search of an identity. We're in identity crisis of what it means to be Nigerian. We're in identity crisis of what values mean. What does values mean? Because everything seems like available for highest purchase. You can sell anything to anybody so long as they're making profit out of it. This is not the Nigeria we want. It was not the Nigeria in which many of us grew up. It's not the Nigeria that young people like yourselves and other youth in the country want. You want a Nigeria that works. And in that Nigeria, you don't care who is the president. If the leadership is inclusive, if the leadership seeks consensus, if the leadership works to the ultimate benefit of all Nigerians, nobody gives a damn who the leader is. But because our leadership has been disruptive and adversarial, people think that when their person is in power, that's when they're included. You can be included without your person being in power. So there are many issues we can canvass around development and leadership in Nigeria. This is just a teaser, of what those kinds of challenges and how we should be addressing them.
Okay, so now let's look at policies. With the recent policies by the United States, that's Trump himself, we know that the funds for running the activities of the United Nations must have been dwindling. What is the strategy? What is the plan from the United Nations? How do they survive? What's their survival strategy?
Lillian, that is true. We have a member state that in its own conception of the world has a different attitude about the whole logic of multilateralism. The truth is that multilateralism has come to stay. The interdependence of member states is no longer in doubt because of globalization. Because many of these issues are cross-national. They're actually regional or international. Conflict cannot be located to Nigeria. It doesn't give you notice. So when Boko Haram started in Nigeria, it spread to Cameroon, it spread to Chad, now it spread to Niger. So all of these issues are cross-national. The role of the United Nations was never meant to be as a donor. The UN is not a donor. And I know that in many countries around the world, the work of the UN country teams often helped create a perception that the UN is a donor. The UN is not a donor. So where we are is that the UN also is rethinking and reconceptualizing its value proposition. The UN is supposed to be your brain box. It's your ideas box. The ideas for persistent and protracted development problems. Development problems can never be solved overnight. They are not instant coffee. And sometimes there's no template, there's no comparative experience for how those development problems can be solved. So the work of the UN is to sit with you, your experts, your teams, and bring in expertise. As resident coordinator for Rwanda, I can pull in expertise from 140 countries around the world. I just tell a member of my team, he has somewhere to go to, he can write to different groups, and we'll pull in comparative experience. If you are a minister for environment and you're dealing with a particular problem, flood, mudslides, you name it, climatic issues, agricultural production is weak, I can say, Excellency Minister, here is comparative experience from 40 countries around Africa, how they've dealt with the problems. You read it with your team, I bring mine, then we sit down and we say, with this knowledge we have, what should country A do differently? That is our role as a United Nations system. It is an accompanying role. So that role must be performed with or without money. The difference is that now that the money has shrunk, so the footprint in terms of staffing numbers will of course reduce, but it's going to reduce in a smart way so that the critical capacities that are needed in the countries are still present. So as I sit in Rwanda, we had more than 1,000 staff. We're down a few hundred. But you know what? Our work has actually now increased.
Wow.
Because what we've done is that we have rearticulated our value proposition. And our value proposition is upstream. High level, strategy, policy, legislation. And it has to lead to scale. It's not tiny, small projects. Not, you go to one village and you teach the women how to make basket or how to fish. Our value proposition is, can you do it for tens of thousands of women? So if you're going to that one village, that's your prototype. That's your testing ground. You can test it. But at the moment you are designing that support to the women, you must have a dimension on how you scale it up. With government, with private sector. Our biggest role now is advisory. You're advising governments how to transform their economies. Many African economies are not doing well. Most, not many. Most African economies are not doing well. That's why there's a lot of protests. If you check the number of protests, civil protests by groups in many African countries, they run in the tens of thousands every year. Some of those protests are degenerating into violence because people are unhappy. People are desperate. People are feeling hopeless. And they are reacting in many ways. They begin from protest. If you don't begin to understand it early and engage and articulate and find consensual solutions, it can only degenerate. The loyalties shift from the state to non-state actors to violence. These are the big issues.
All right, now let's look at interference of military when it comes to governance and democracy in Africa. Would you say that, does this mean that democracy is no longer addressing, how it is the well-being of the people to the point where the military is now having to interfere in democracy in Africa?
There are many issues in that question. The truth is that democracy is failing Africans, as currently practiced. It's failing Africans. So people talk about countries having constitutions without a culture of constitutionalism. Many people will say that what you have are electoral democracies. People contest elections and then they manage the country as it's their personal estate. So people are angry, they are frustrated. Many leaders don't abide by the terms of office, terms of tenure, and they want to stay on. So there's one trap, one bucket of issues we can unpack in relation to the manifestations and the practice of democracy. The second bucket does not mean that extra constitutional means of change of government is okay. It is not okay. The military are not democrats. The military is a vertical system of leadership. It's a command and control structure. So for that period that you even have military in office, you know what happens? Your democratic culture changes. A democratic culture of consultation, of participation and inclusion changes to a culture of with immediate effect. The governor has said, the administrator has said. So you imbibe a culture of the immediate effect. Then a few years later, you hand over power to civilians, and that governor starts to behave like a military regime. So you have a contestation of different political culture, democratic values. So the military will never be a solution. In countries where the military has intervened, it's often because the politicians refuse to step down or elongated their tenure, and legitimate means of transfer of power evaporate, and then the military come in as a last resort. So the challenge for our institutions, ECOWAS, African Union, IGAD, SADC, you name it, all the regional economic communities in Africa, is that their injunctions, their conventions on the democratic transfer of power must be upheld. And when an elected government tries to undermine their constitution by wanting to stay in office, they must have the stomach to say, no, you cannot. People need to see that they are on their side, and that will be one way of encouraging the military not to step into power. The military are no messiah in any part of the world. They are not. And so people should stop this excitement, potential excitement, when you're not happy with the government of your country. You are praying in the night, yeah? You're lighting candles and hoping that the military, no, they don't solve anything. They actually create more mess than they set at end, you know. But you see a few visible things, because they don't consult. They can build a road, they can build a, an institution, they can do something, and people see those things and they're like, you see, they think it was better during the military.
So you're saying it's not helpful?
No, it's not helpful for building a political culture. You know something people don't realize? No investor will come to your country under a military regime. None. You take your economy back decades, because what it does is it creates uncertainty. Money doesn't like uncertainty. Money likes stability.
Yes.
Money likes certainties. It creates policy somersaults. So the military comes, they change the policies. Sometimes they don't listen to the bureaucrats in the ministries to advise them. They make this decision because it's populism. Military regime is populism. You know, they say things that are popular in the public domain. It doesn't mean that they are rational, economically rational, or politically rational. So it doesn't help at all. And so Nigerians must take a deep breath, calm down. Let's find solutions to our problems. Let's continue that discussion. It is messy, it is true. And sometimes people will not listen to us. It is the only way forward. Military regimes are no solution to anything. I have walked across the world. When I was director for conflict prevention for UNDP in New York, I covered the entire globe. My team, we had programs in 70 countries across 4 continents. I've seen it across the world. It doesn't work. I then became director for governance and peace building in Africa. I covered 46 sub-Saharan African countries. I supported all the 46 sub-Saharan African countries from our office in Addis Ababa, particularly around the election time, crises, change. The military are no solution anywhere. So I can tell you experience. You name any country in Africa, I can take an anecdote from that country of what we saw and what we witnessed and the challenge they went through. And it's not resort to military regime to solve it. None, not at all.
Well, I have one single question before we round off.
Yes.
So there is a feeling that with the Western countries, all these policies, the reforms, they seem to be enacted, fast, immediately. But when it comes to African country and a country like Nigeria, all those reforms and policies, it doesn't get quick feedback. Like, it doesn't work. It is not implemented immediately as opposed to the Western countries. What is the problem? Where do we draw the line? Where is the gap?
Lillian, please, let's start by disabusing certain notions. Let nobody tell you that the Western nations are better.
Okay.
In everything. They are better in some respects. But look at how many years it's taking for their democracies to take root. Yeah? The average democracy in Africa is how many years old? 50, 60 years. That's just somebody coming to maturity. In the life of a country, 60 years is nothing. That is not to say we should not be impatient with the delays. We must be impatient. But in the Western countries, there are many things they do. But know what they call lobbyists, influencers? Lobbyists get paid a lot of money to influence. So many of these countries where you say the policies come thick and fast, actually the policies are bought. It's the lobbyists who pay money to the congressmen when they're contesting an election, supporting their travels to different places. They have organized interest groups, recruit lobbyists, and pay them huge sums of money to influence what the parliament in those countries do. Where is the average citizen in that country? Nowhere. So sometimes when they make decisions, they're making decisions to suit interests in the economy, not for the larger public. Now, here we don't have legitimate lobbyists in Africa or in Nigeria, so we think that everything is corruption. There, it seems to me like it's corruption, but it's allowed by the law. So now, democracy is messy. The consultations need to happen because different voices have to be heard. Remember, each of us come from different societies. We've created a nation called Nigeria only in 2014. So we have to start working together to make it work. The problem is not in the policies. The problem is in the implementation. And that's something we need to discuss again. How to ensure that we don't just write excellent policies, we implement them. There are many countries in Africa, including one where I'm based, Rwanda, where the policies are implemented. So we have a number of examples in Africa where it works.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Just like we're running out of time,
I guess.
but I really wanted to ask you about, Rwanda and Nigeria are often contrasting when it comes to governance and development. So I'd like to know, why is that, and what is it that Rwanda is doing that Nigeria is not doing? But we're out of time now, so
another time
we'll continue that conversation some other time. But thank you so much, Professor Ozonia Ojielu, for this lovely conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very
so
much, Signature TV, for the outstanding work you're doing. You're one of 2 TV stations in the entire southeast of Nigeria. So, given the role and power of the media, particularly in the context of Nigeria's plural society, I think all of our interests, businesses, politicians in this part of the country ought to give significant, solid support to Signature TV. You're a mouthpiece. You're a megaphone for understanding the development challenges of the southeast of Nigeria. You're a platform for articulating issues, both positive but also the grievances that people have, so that those in authority can listen and make decisions. So you deserve every support from our political elite in the southeast, both from the private sector in the southeast, but particularly from the political elite, investment in support in programming, so you can reach every nook and cranny, not just of the southeast, because you are global, you are terrestrial, so you can reach the world. But you see media that have a particular bent, Al Jazeera, they articulate a certain view. Signature TV can articulate that certain view as we construct the new Nigeria of our dreams. As we try to build a national consensus. This is a powerful platform for articulating the views of those of us who come from the southeast. I'd like to call for full support for Signature TV.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being here with us on Signature Morning, and this is still Signature TV. Thank you for joining us. We'll go on a short break. When we return, we are going to be bringing you something on the educational sector concerning the youth. Do stay with us.
We are local.
The international community is observing
Why the main market is in chaos. People are
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye.
We have taken the vote by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.